What unfolds when one of Hollywood's toughest, no-frills action stars sits down across from daytime television's most outspoken panelist and the conversation derails almost instantly? The result was something few people in that studio, or watching at home, were prepared for. What happened on The View that morning quickly turned a routine promotional appearance into a tense, unforgettable confrontation. Jason Statham stepped onto the set expecting the usual press stop to promote his newest film. The British star, widely recognized for his roles in the Fast and Furious series and a long list of adrenaline-fueled blockbusters, had handled countless interviews over the years. He was accustomed to friendly banter, a few light-hearted questions about performing his own stunts, and perhaps some playful teasing. What he did not anticipate was an immediate verbal strike from Joy Behar the second the cameras began rolling. With her trademark grin, Joy wasted no time. She leaned in and said she had to bring up something that had been bothering her. She described his films as little more than violence porn, questioning when he might finally choose a project with genuine depth. The remark landed heavily. Around the table, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, Sonny Hostin shifted uneasily. This was far from the warm welcome most guests received. Jason remained composed, leaning back slightly. He lifted an eyebrow and responded in his steady London accent that her characterization was narrow. He pointed out that his films provide employment for thousands, entertain audiences worldwide, and often revolve around themes like loyalty, family, and defending what is right. He calmly questioned how that could be reduced to the crude label she had used. Joy pressed on. She dismissed his defense and argued that his on-screen persona mainly involved speeding cars and throwing punches. She challenged him on where the artistry was, where the social insight could be found. She suggested that with his visibility and influence, he had a responsibility to pursue projects with greater meaning. Whoopi attempted to redirect the discussion, but Jason signaled that it was fine. Though still outwardly calm, a tightening in his jaw hinted that the repeated jabs were beginning to strike a nerve. He said he was interested in hearing more about Joy's definition of meaningful entertainment. Joy elaborated, suggesting that his movies glorified toxic masculinity. She argued that his characters consistently resolved conflicts with physical force and questioned the message that might send, particularly to young boys. The studio fell into a strained silence. Even the crew seemed to sense the mounting tension. Offstage, Jason's publicist appeared visibly distressed. He repeated the phrase toxic masculinity, slowly, his voice dropping lower. He remarked that it was curious to hear that accusation from someone whose television career often involved publicly criticizing others. Joy bristled and insisted she was holding people accountable, not attacking them. Jason replied evenly, asking whether she considered it accountability to spend an extended segment dismantling someone's life's work without understanding the effort behind it. Sarah attempted to pivot the discussion toward the stunts in his new movie, noting that he performed many of them himself. Joy, however, was determined to continue. She said she knew enough about his films to recognize that they generated enormous profits by selling the fantasy that violence solves problems. She accused them of reinforcing damaging stereotypes about masculinity and implied that an intelligent actor like him could choose more substantial material. Jason clasped his hands tightly, tension visible in his shoulders. He responded quietly that it was ironic to question his intelligence while dismissing action films as devoid of artistic value, and implying that global audiences could not distinguish fiction from reality. Joy insisted she had criticized the films, not the fans. He countered that the implication was clear: if the movies were irresponsible, then he, as their star, was the problem. His tone sharpened. He stated that he made films people genuinely wanted to see rather than obscure art, house projects with tiny audiences. Sonny tried to mediate, suggesting she understood Joy's broader point, but Joy cut her off and reiterated that actors of his stature had options. She argued he could use his platform to challenge viewers and address pressing social issues, instead of repeatedly choosing lucrative, formulaic action roles. The word mindless hung between them. Jason, no longer relaxed, rose abruptly from his chair. The sudden movement startled everyone at the table. Standing over the panel, he maintained control of his voice, though an unmistakable intensity edged every syllable. He said that mindless behavior was sitting comfortably behind a desk and taking cheap shots at those who create. Mindless, he argued, was believing that one person's opinion outweighed the millions who willingly paid to watch his films. Joy's face reddened as she told him to sit down, calling his reaction excessive. He remained standing and questioned whether he had been invited under false pretenses. From his perspective, the segment felt less like an interview and more like a setup. He accused her of spending the entire conversation insulting his career choices and belittling both him and his audience. Whoopi attempted once more to restore calm, urging everyone to pause and breathe. Jason, eyes still fixed on Joy, said that if she wanted a real discussion, Then they would have it openly rather than disguising criticism as casual conversation. The studio air felt electric as a routine promotional stop transformed into a heated debate about art, responsibility, and respect in front of a live audience. Joy, tell me something. What exactly have you added to the entertainment world? What tangible mark have you left besides sitting at this table each day criticizing the work of others? Her jaw dropped in disbelief. She shot back that she had been in the industry longer than he had been alive, her voice sharp with outrage. Jason cut in before she could continue. He said that simply occupying space in an industry for decades was not the same thing as contributing something meaningful to it. He explained that he had helped bring characters to life who motivated audiences, had starred in films that drew families into theaters together, and had collaborated with stunt crews and directors who constantly pushed technical and creative limits. Then he asked her what she did in comparison, suggesting that her profession revolved around tearing people down. Around them, the rest of the panel glanced anxiously toward the producers off camera. The situation was spiraling far beyond a heated exchange and into something far more volatile than anyone had anticipated. Sarah attempted to steer things back to safer ground by mentioning his future projects, but Joy quickly shut that down. She insisted she wanted to continue the discussion. Raising her voice, she declared that what she contributed was accountability. She claimed she asked the difficult questions other interviewers avoided, and refused to allow celebrities to sit comfortably, while promoting what she described as shallow material. Jason let out a laugh that carried no trace of amusement. He questioned whether that was truly accountability or simply amateur psychological commentary delivered for effect. He told her she seemed to view herself as a fearless journalist when, in his opinion, she was merely a talk show personality who enjoyed putting guests on edge. Outraged, Joy rose from her chair. She insisted she had spent decades discussing serious cultural and societal issues. She argued that just because he felt uncomfortable being critiqued did not mean she should abandon her role. He repeated the word, job, with a shake of his head. In his view, her responsibility was to engage audiences and foster thoughtful conversations, not to dominate the exchange with her personal agenda or position herself as the focal point. She fired back that her agenda was to elevate discourse above what she considered shallow entertainment. She said she expected more from public figures who wielded enormous influence. Jason pointed out that she continued to use the phrase, mindless entertainment, as though it were inherently degrading. He argued that there was nothing inferior about providing escapism or joy. He suggested that believing art must be bleak or heavy to matter was a narrow way of thinking. Offering people laughter or distraction from daily stress, he said, was not something to sneer at. Sonny tried once more to calm the exchange, attempting to frame the disagreement in neutral terms. Jason firmly stopped her, making it clear this had become a direct conversation between him and Joy. He said that if they were going to discuss responsibility, they should also address the obligation to treat guests with courtesy, and to prepare for interviews with genuine curiosity rather than hostility. Joy insisted she was fully prepared. She claimed to know his box office statistics, critical reviews, and career trajectory, and said that knowledge was precisely why she felt justified in challenging him. He demanded to know what exactly she was accusing him of. He listed his successes, the enjoyment audiences derived from his movies, and the physical and creative demands his roles required. He asked her to specify his supposed offense. Leaning across the table, she declared that his wrongdoing lay in squandering his potential. She accused him of choosing the simplest path for financial reward rather than using his platform to create social change. She repeated her claim that his films reinforced damaging ideas about masculinity and normalized violence. Jason stepped closer, lowering his voice until it was nearly a whisper. He suggested that her relentless criticism stemmed from bitterness about her own fading relevance, and that she targeted those actively creating, because she lacked that fulfillment herself. The audience gasped audibly. Even the crew appeared stunned by the bluntness of his words. Joy's face cycled through shades of red before settling into a deep flush. She sputtered that she had been on television far longer than he had been making films. He replied coldly that longevity did not automatically equal significance. Remaining on air for years, he said, did not guarantee that one had made a meaningful difference. He asked how many people she had genuinely inspired. He then spoke about young viewers who had taken up martial arts after watching his movies, families who bonded over action films, and stunt performers whose livelihoods depended on the types of projects he supported. For a rare moment, Joy seemed at a loss for words. When she recovered, her voice trembled with fury. She accused him of believing himself superior, of mistaking car chases and fight scenes for artistry. He answered without hesitation that he did consider himself better than someone who thrived on humiliating others publicly. He added that her inability to distinguish between constructive dialogue and cruelty revealed more about her character than she might realize. The atmosphere in the studio had grown almost suffocating. The other hosts looked desperate for an exit, and the production staff appeared to be scrambling behind the scenes. Yet Joy pressed on. She demanded to discuss character and pivoted to real-world violence, accusing him of profiting from on-screen brutality while communities grappled with tragic realities. She argued that his films perpetuated macho ideals at a time when society was struggling with the consequences of toxic behavior. Jason abruptly told her to stop. His command was delivered so firmly that she actually fell silent mid-sentence. The room became eerily quiet except for the faint mechanical hum of the cameras. In a low, controlled tone, he said that if she wanted to talk about real people suffering, then they should discuss that honestly and without theatrics. He began to explain that real lives were complex, that audiences understood the distinction between fiction and reality, and that storytelling, no matter the genre, could not be blamed for every societal issue. Let me explain something to you. On one of my productions, our stunt coordinator suffered a devastating spinal injury. He broke his back performing a sequence designed to thrill audiences. While he was recovering, I made sure his family was financially secure and supported every step of the way. That wasn't a press release. That wasn't a headline. It was simply the right thing to do. He continued without allowing her to cut in. There are organizations I donate to and causes I quietly back that you know nothing about, because I don't parade every act of generosity in front of cameras. Not everything meaningful needs to be advertised for applause. Joy attempted to interject, but he raised his hand and pressed on. He spoke about children battling cancer who come to film sets through the Make-A-Wish Foundation. He described how their expressions change when they meet the heroes they have only seen on screens. He mentioned veterans who have approached him to say that watching his movies provides a sense of structure and clarity, even temporary relief from the weight of PTSD, because they see stories where good confronts evil and courage still matters. The studio had fallen into complete silence. Crew members stood frozen. Jason's tone grew firmer, charged with conviction. He pointed out that she sat comfortably in a well-paid position offering commentary on industries she had never directly experienced. Yet she felt entitled to lecture him about accountability. He reminded her that she had never put her body through punishing training, never endured months of preparation for demanding roles, never spent long days filming in dangerous conditions to give audiences a few hours of escape. Joy responded again, though her voice had lost some of its earlier force. She insisted that the core issue was the message conveyed by such films. He let out a short, humorless laugh. He explained what he believed those stories communicated: that decent people stand up for justice, that loyalty and family are worth defending, and that confronting bullies sometimes requires courage. Leaning closer, he asked what kind of example she thought she was setting in that moment. He questioned what viewers at home were learning as they watched her berate a guest who had arrived expecting a professional exchange. Her complexion shifted from flushed to pale. For the first time since the segment began, uncertainty flickered across her face. She insisted she was engaging in dialogue, not attacking him. He challenged that characterization, his voice rising slightly. He listed her accusations one by one, dismissing his work as empty, belittling his audience, questioning his intelligence and integrity, and suggesting he contributed to real-world harm. He asked how any of that qualified as a balanced conversation. Whoopi made a final attempt to steer the show toward safer territory, but he declined. Without breaking eye contact, he said viewers deserved to witness what happened when someone did not simply absorb criticism in silence. Joy tried to suggest he was overreacting. He straightened, his presence commanding. He pointed out that she had spent nearly the entire segment attempting to undermine him publicly, and now framed his defense as excessive. Turning slightly toward the cameras, he remarked that this spectacle was being presented as journalism. He suggested that confusing personal opinion with informed insight was part of the problem. He stated plainly that she had no first-hand understanding of the filmmaking process, the discipline required to build a career, or the work involved in creating something positive for others. She stammered that he was misrepresenting her words. He interrupted, recounting her statements in detail, calling his projects shallow, labeling him irresponsible, claiming he squandered his potential, and accusing him of fueling social problems. He argued that she could not now retreat from those remarks and pretend they were neutral observations. The co-hosts avoided eye contact. The audience was so quiet individual breaths were audible. Cameras zoomed in on Joy's expression, which reflected anger, humiliation, and perhaps apprehension. She insisted she had a right to voice her perspective. He replied instantly that he had an equal right to challenge a perspective he believed was ill-informed and unfair. She had criticized what she called toxic masculinity, he said, but what term applied to using a powerful platform to publicly corner a guest? What label fit inviting someone under the expectation of a routine interview, and then subjecting them to a barrage of accusations? She denied setting a trap. He demanded to know how else it should be described. From his vantage point, he said, She had decided before he entered the studio that he would be cast as the antagonist in a narrative she had already constructed. Shaking his head, he described what he saw as the real loss in the situation. She had the opportunity to explore meaningful topics with someone who had devoted decades to entertaining audiences. She could have asked about the craft of performing, collaboration with directors, or the technical evolution of action filmmaking. Instead, he said, she chose to shrink the conversation into something petty and hostile. She tried again to regain control, claiming he was misjudging her intentions. He cut her off, asking whether her goal had been to embarrass him, to appear intellectually superior by making him seem foolish, or to make a point about masculinity by adopting an even more aggressive tone than most men would dare use on air. The remark visibly struck her. For a brief instant, hurt showed through the anger. Yet he continued, saying that responsibility extended beyond criticizing others. It also meant treating people with basic decency, meant respecting viewers enough to facilitate genuine dialogue rather than turning guests into targets. He began stepping toward the edge of the set, his movements deliberate. He spoke about personal accountability, not just to audiences but to oneself. He suggested that holding others to high standards required holding oneself to the same measure. The studio remained hushed, tension thick in the air as the confrontation hovered on the brink of whatever would come next. "Where do you think you're going? We're not done yet." Her voice rang out sharply across the studio as he headed toward the edge of the stage. Jason paused and turned back to face her one final time. His expression was steady, almost detached. He told her they had, in fact, been done the moment she shifted the exchange from a professional discussion to a personal attack. The line had been crossed long before he stood up. He faced the primary camera, addressing viewers directly. He explained that he had arrived to speak about his latest project, to connect with supporters, and to take part in what he assumed would be a thoughtful and engaging conversation. Instead, he said, the experience had turned into a lesson in how an interview should not be handled. Joy pushed back her chair and rose abruptly. She insisted he could not simply walk away, emphasizing that this was her program. He responded with a thin, humorless smile. If it was her show, he suggested, then perhaps she ought to conduct herself like a seasoned host rather than someone picking fights on a playground. Behind the scenes, production assistants gestured urgently, clearly scrambling to manage a situation that had spun far beyond routine daytime television friction. Jason calmly began removing his microphone pack, the small motion somehow louder than the argument that had filled the room minutes earlier. As he handed the mic to a stunned crew member, he told Joy that he actually felt a measure of sympathy for her. He said it must be draining to carry that much anger every day, isolating to push away anyone attempting an authentic exchange. Her voice wavered slightly as she insisted she was not angry, only deeply passionate. He shook his head and corrected her in a measured tone. Passion, he said, did not look like this. What she displayed was anger redirected at people who had done nothing to deserve it. That was not conviction, it was something far less admirable. He turned briefly to the other panelists, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes and Sunny Hostin, and thanked them for their efforts to keep the discussion respectful. He apologized that circumstances had made that impossible. The tension at the table was visible, none of them seemed certain how to respond. As he started toward the exit of the view set, Joy made one last attempt to reclaim control of the narrative. She called out that his departure exemplified the very toxic tendencies she had been criticizing, walking away when confronted and refusing to engage with challenging questions. Jason stopped at the boundary of the stage and pivoted once more. This time his tone was composed, nearly soft, which only heightened the impact of what he said next. He told her that the only toxic presence in the room that day had been her conduct. He pointed out that she accused him of avoiding hard questions, yet she had not posed thoughtful ones, only accusations framed as inquiries. He stated that if anyone should feel embarrassed about how events had unfolded, it was not him. He held her gaze for a long moment, the studio so quiet that the faint whir of equipment could be heard. He added that there was a crucial distinction between challenging someone and being deliberately cruel. One fostered dialogue, the other shut it down. He said viewers deserved better from a program that claimed to value open discussion. Guests deserved better than being ambushed for spectacle. And, perhaps most pointedly, he suggested she deserved better from herself than to rely on hostility as a substitute for substance. With that, he turned and walked off the set. The aftermath was almost surreal. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to clap or remain silent. The co-hosts appeared stunned, their usual on-air composure replaced by visible discomfort. Joy stood in place, smaller somehow. The confidence that had fueled her earlier remarks noticeably diminished. The cameras continued recording for a few lingering seconds. They captured her expression as the weight of the moment settled in. A mixture of disbelief and the dawning realization that the exchange had not unfolded as she might have expected. For once, words seemed to fail her. What had begun as a routine promotional stop had escalated into a confrontation that left the studio shaken. Viewers at home witnessed a rare instance of a guest refusing to absorb criticism quietly, and instead pushing back forcefully against the tone and framing of the discussion. The clash was not merely about movies or genre preferences, it had transformed into a broader argument about respect, responsibility, and the boundaries between critique and personal attack. As the broadcast struggled to regain its footing, the energy in the room remained fractured. The usual rhythm of daytime television, banter, transitions, had been replaced by an unscripted rupture. Whether one saw his exit as justified self-defense or unnecessary escalation, the moment was undeniably raw. The set lights still glowed, the cameras still rolled, and the hosts attempted to compose themselves, but the atmosphere had changed irreversibly. The segment would be replayed, dissected, and debated far beyond that studio. In the span of a single appearance, a standard celebrity interview had transformed into a pointed showdown over professionalism and personal conduct, leaving everyone present to reckon with the fallout.